G'day, Josh here with another Chess Rush video, and we're going to be talking about positioning today. Now, when I first started playing Chess Rush and when I put out essentially the beginner's guide to Chess Rush, I did talk about where to place your heroes on the board, but that was a long time ago. I have a much greater understanding of the game after 4 seasons, and the tools in-game to show some of the information off are much greater as well. Primarily this preparation area, which allows you to not only create custom lineups that you can then use in-game, but it also allows you to click on the little grid icon on the right and bring up a hero position screen, which you can then drag heroes around in that screen. So we're going to use that to talk about some of the things you need to consider when positioning, and yeah, that's going to be it, but it's quite detailed. So we're going to jump in with this sorcerer build. As you can see here, this is the build. Nothing special. It's a pretty standard sorcerer composition. This particular one has a little punisher flair, so it's 6 sorcerers, 4 humans, 4 punishers, and you can see that we are set up in what is known essentially as a turtle formation or a corner formation. And now, before we actually jump into the specifics of positioning, I've seen this question asked often. In fact, I was asking it often until I heard the answer. So I want to give a shout out to Warrior. Many of you know him from Reddit. He's released some videos, very active on the official Discord as well. Warrior has done the research on this and essentially determined that no matter what game mode you are playing, whether it is using a head-to-head format like Treasure Arena, or whether it is using a format where you're playing a copy of an opponent's heroes, you have what is essentially a home and an away. Each round you'll either be assigned the home team or the away team, like in a sports match. And if you are the home team, your heroes will jump first. So your heroes will move before the other team's heroes. If you are the away team, their heroes will move first. There is nothing you can do to counteract that. So roughly 50% of the time, your hero is going to be jumping first, and the other 50% of the time, your hero is going to be moving second. So what that means is if you are set up in this turtle formation and you've got melee heroes that can only attack 1 square away, then if you're the home team, they're going to break the formation, and you have to just deal with it. Unfortunately, it's a little bit frustrating, specifically against assassins when you don't want to break the turtle formation, but the best thing you can do is be aware that it exists in the game. I'm not sure if the developers call it home and away. That's just a term that Warrior came up with, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So if you're the home team, your heroes will move first. If you're the away team, the enemy's heroes will move first. It's part of the game, and if you're aware of it, then you can better position to accommodate, especially in 1v1 scenarios when it's the final head-to-head match. Now, you'll notice that in this particular turtle formation, we've got quite a few ranged heroes. So Sanzang is a ranged hero. Void Destruction is a ranged hero. Flamecooler is ranged. Void Doom is ranged. Lightbringer back there is ranged. Frost Lotus is ranged. Joey is ranged. And once Devourer transforms, he's also ranged. The others are melee heroes. Melee meaning that they can attack 1 square away. When you're in game and you click on the heroes during the prep phase, you can see exactly their range. And the ranged heroes, hunters and sorcerers primarily, but other heroes as well, can attack up to a certain number of squares away. Once again, in game, click on that hero and it will give you an exact breakdown of just how far away they can attack. Now, obviously, generally speaking, you want the heroes that can only attack 1 square in front of them on the front line, because if they're stuck behind, then they're going to have to break formation to get out and do anything, and so they're not going to be very effective in the back spot of a corner formation like Lightbringer is in that back spot there. So you want your ranged heroes behind, your melee heroes in front. Usually those melee heroes are also tankier. Essentially speaking, there are some heroes in Chess Rush that are considered utility heroes. Calamity is one of them. Moonlight Dragon's another, where they actually their abilities proc and they provide allies with shields or heals, things like that. But generally speaking, most heroes will fall into either a tank or a DPS hero. So ones that are absorbing a lot of damage or ones that are dealing a lot of damage. And you need a pretty good balance of both in your endgame build if you want to do well. A front line of solid tanks to provide time for the backline of DPS heroes to just generate a ton of damage to overwhelm your enemies. So most good endgame compositions will have a pretty good balance of both tanky heroes, DPS heroes, and also some utility heroes thrown in there depending on the composition. So in this particular composition, we've got Lancelot bottom left. You can see him there. We've got the Devourer, we've got Nezha, and we've got... so they're all melee heroes. Every other hero in our composition is actually ranged. But Sansang is frontlined, and there's a very important reason for that. And this is another consideration when positioning heroes, and especially when we're looking at different formations or the opponent's composition and what you're matched up against. There are some heroes that have very, very important abilities in game, and Sansang is one of those heroes. So when his ability goes off, he deals damage to every enemy on the board, no matter where they are, and has a chance to reset their mana and essentially silence them until they have to, and so they have to regenerate that mana again. So the higher the star rating of Sansang, the more likely that is to occur, and it can be one of the most impactful abilities in the game outside of legendaries. So, and even then, a 3-star Sansang can win you games on his own, but you want to make sure that he's getting his ability off as soon as possible, because you want him to be resetting your enemy's mana bars before they use that mana to trigger their own abilities. So in this particular formation, we're not breaking the corner or the turtle formation, but we do have him frontlined so that enemy heroes will attack him as a priority. Now, generally speaking, especially for melee heroes, but also for ranged, they're going to attack the first enemy that comes into their range. So for many of the enemy's melee heroes, that's going to be this Sansang. It's also worth noting, and I'm just trying to figure out how to best explain this on this little graph, on this little chart here, but essentially Lancelot here, if we move these four here, actually I'll do it on this side. Let's go Sansang over here, Lancelot over here, and Devourer here. And let's assume that this Nezha is an enemy. Now, if he's coming from this direction, he's going to be engaging with the Devourer before the Lancelot, before the Sansang. So depending on what side of the board your enemy's formation is positioned on, you have to be aware of the order of engagement and the fact that this Nezha is going to engage the Devourer first because it's the nearest enemy. It's not going to jump across here and engage with the Sansang. So that what that means is if you do have a frontline composition, you need to make sure that you're putting important utility heroes like this Sansang in positions that will get their abilities happening as quickly as possible. Now, typically speaking, I won't do that if he's a 1-star because there is a very real risk of him dying before he gets his ability off. But once he's 2-star, I'll either do that in turtle formation, or if I'm doing a different formation, I might just stick him in the front on his own with a Forbidden Tome and a Spellbane Staff to make sure he gets his ability off as quickly as possible. Some other very important utility heroes in this particular build, Lightbringer. She does need to be protected though, because a stun will affect her ability from casting, so you'll often put a Spellbane Staff on her and stick her in the back. Joey's another one that can be frontline once she's 2-star. She's got a very important area of effect ability that is a stun as well as a whole deal of damage. You also want to get other legendaries triggering as quickly as possible because their abilities are so game-breaking. Devourer is another one. Once he transforms, he deals so much more damage, so you want to get him essentially firing his ability off, or transforming in his case, as quickly as possible. You can do that via positioning. You can also do that with items. So I will often put a Forbidden Tome on Devourer, for instance, because he starts off as a melee hero, so he's going to be taking that damage, and that will help him transform quickly. Now, this is a turtle formation. If we actually close out here, and we're going to look at this Assassin's build, you'll notice a very, very different formation. We have our 6 Assassins on the baseline on the left-hand side. Putting Assassins towards the back means that they will jump to the opposing backline when the round starts. Keep in mind the home and away order of whose team jumps first. It's obviously with assassins better being the away team so that your opponent breaks their formation and then your assassins jump. And then on the right hand side here, we've got these other heroes. Now often you might see these heroes closer to the front, but I actually want to give a big shout out to DD Chris, who was the first person I saw doing this with assassins. Is the heroes that aren't going to jump to the opposing backline, move them further back, because that encourages the enemy's heroes to break formation even more to come and engage with your heroes when they are the home team, when they jump first, which gives you even more space for your assassins to jump into that backline and be super, super damaging. But you certainly don't have to do that. You can certainly set up in different formations. Maybe you put these on the front line like this and split the assassins on either side like that. That would also be another viable assassin positioning. It really depends on the sort of opponents that you are matching up against, and we will get to that shortly. So let's go ahead and apply that for now, and then we'll look at the other build that I put together here. This is an Eastern build. And you can see that the positioning here, this is kind of the opposite of that sorcerer build in that most of our heroes are actually melee. There's very few ranged heroes. In fact, the only hero that starts off as ranged is Void, Destruction, and Sanzang. Everyone else starts off as melee, but Devourer and Dragoon will transform to ranged heroes. But we want Dragoon frontline, getting that ability happening as quickly as possible. Same with Sanzang, same with Nerja there. I could also viably do something like that, maybe frontline that Devourer to get him transforming as quickly as possible as well. But this is a split formation, and that means that the split formations, or spreading out in general, are very, very effective against sorcerer compositions. You have to consider the enemies that you're going up against. And the main two considerations generally when playing are assassins or sorcerers, but that is a little bit of a generalization because you'll have builds that use a few assassins or a few sorcerers. But the things that you're considering, the things that I'm considering when looking at positioning, is whether I'm going to have enemy heroes jumping to my backline, and whether I have to avoid massive area of effect damage, or massive crowd control, like General of War and his area of effect stun. Same thing with Shakaraka and Kraken. They also have area of effect stuns. Shakaraka is a particularly nasty one, especially at 2-star. It's quite a big area of effect. You could absolutely frontline. In fact, looking at this positioning again, I just quickly put this together to get ready for this video. If I was doing this positioning, if I was having my time over, I think I would set it up like that in this specific instance, just to make sure that these super important high cost heroes are getting their abilities off as quickly as possible. And then obviously Void Destruction is range, so we don't mind putting him behind, maybe even set up like that or something. These heroes are going to have to move to engage with the enemy, but there's a possibility that we stay still, the enemy moves to us, and especially against assassins, these are pretty tanky heroes. In an Eastern build, everyone's pretty tanky with 6 Easterns, but that's a fantastic consideration. Now, what I am going to do is, actually, we'll stick with that Eastern build. I just want to show you, oops, didn't want to do that. I wanted to do this. Just want to show you some other possible formations. So this is a split formation, and you can have that at the front. You can also have it at the back, which is essentially, now obviously we're not taking into consideration, oops, I swapped that out. We're not actually taking into consideration the specific heroes here. I'm just showing you what a split formation might look like. That would be a back aligned split formation, and there's lots of various ways to do that. Depending on what you're facing, you might want to encourage assassins to jump in there and then beat up on the assassins with strong tanky units. That can be something fun to do. You can maybe frontline 2 super important heroes and have back corners. So there's tons of different ways to do the split formation. You can also just go absolutely crazy and spread everything out quite a bit to make sure that nothing is initially going to get too hurt by the area of effect stuff. Keep in mind that once the battle starts and heroes start moving, if an opponent is set up corner formation and you end up moving first, then you're going to end up in a situation where you're kind of surrounding the enemy's heroes, maybe with a ranged hero a bit further back, but you're going to kind of be looking like that rough situation. So you might start off quite spread. You won't necessarily end up quite as spread, especially if you move first against a turtle formation, but it's definitely still worth doing. Especially when your opponents move first, and it encourages them to break up that turtle formation. So it's lots of different options. There are some of your split and spread options. You saw the corner formation. Another way to do that corner formation, once again, ignoring the heroes. I'm just using them as examples. And this one, Warrior and I came up with, we call this a box and one. We essentially have a turtle formation on the right-hand side, and you have one hero acting as bait, whether it's to draw an area of effect spell or draw a few heroes. You generally want that to be a fairly tanky hero, so maybe it's a 3-star Bargy in this case. You can frontline it, backline it, do whatever you like there, but that can be another effective bit of positioning. And sometimes you'll think that, let's say you're in a final 1v1, you think you've found the optimal positioning. Let's say we think this is the optimal positioning and it's just not working for you. What you can actually do, and this is another great tip from Warrior, just flip the orientation of your positioning. So it's really important to have in your settings drag to swap turned on. So you can just do that and it swaps the position of heroes. But then you can simply just drag all the heroes across in the next prep phase, and you've essentially mirrored your positioning. And sometimes if you feel like you should be winning but it's just not happening, sometimes just flipping your positioning can make all the difference and end up winning you a game that you might have otherwise lost. But it's definitely worth constantly changing positioning, and not only worrying about your own positioning, but worrying about an enemy's positioning as well. So for instance, if they're trying to get their Sanzang from firing as quickly as possible, you don't want to put an enemy right near that Sanzang. You want to buy as much time as possible, so maybe you want to spread your heroes away from that Sanzang. Another consideration, and I don't actually have, let's change this, let's edit this Eastern build. We're going to change this Shark to Nightingale. And the reason for that is Nightingale is another really important one to consider on the enemy's team. Because of her ability, she basically sucks the mana regeneration out of the enemies that she's dealing damage to. So if she's matched up against this Sanzang, for instance, that's the enemy's Nightingale, your Sanzang's here. If they're going to engage each other straight away, then you don't want that Sanzang there. You want to actually move that Sanzang away. Sometimes it's a little bit of a game of chess, excuse the pun, in that as the timer counts down, they might have that Nightingale somewhere else, and then last second before the match starts, swap that Nightingale across, and without you realizing it, all of a sudden your Sanzang is going to be doing nothing because it's getting all of the mana removed as it's attacking. So it's definitely something, once again, in a final 1v1 situation, consider that. And make sure that your really important utility heroes are not across from a Nightingale or a hero like that, and make sure that your enemy's key utility heroes, that you're doing your best to delay them getting their abilities off as often as possible. So the same goes for you. If you've got the Nightingale and you're up against a key hero such as a Sanzang, then make sure you're positioning that Nightingale right near that Sanzang so that that Sanzang doesn't really do a whole lot against your team. I'm trying to think if there are any other general positions that I use. Often in a composition that I run, and you'll see that here in my record, it's a Legends build. I've done a few videos on it. They're very good in turbo mode. It runs 3 Assassins. That's actually the primary combo. So if we go back here to my lineup, and let's edit this assassin build. So let's just swap out 3 of these assassins to something else. Doesn't really matter what, but anything that's not assassins. We'll just grab 3 warriors maybe. Where's another warrior? Glutton. All right, so there we've got our 3 assassins. Save that. Let's go back to the positioning. What I will often do is kind of similar to the other assassin build. I'll have 3 assassins on one side and I'll have everything else backlined. If I've got a really important hero that I need their ability triggering off really quickly, let's say that was a Sanzang for instance, then I might set up in that position. And that exact position is actually something that I use quite a bit with my Legends build. Well, I'll end up having usually these 3 assassins. Actually, what I'll do, might as well while we're here, let's go ahead and swap out for, once again, go to edit here. Let's swap out for the actual heroes that I would be using. So I might have a Shakaraka there, a Lotus Prince, a Void Doom, a War Machine. Often I will also have the Executioner, and as I touched on earlier, Sanzang. So let's go ahead and save that, and I will show you with this build the exact positioning I'm usually going for endgame. I will have basically that positioning. Now, this may vary if I'm in a 1v1 or we're down to like the top 3 and I know the builds of my opponents. If it's an assassin, 6 assassin build, actually this would be pretty similar. Maybe I'll swap like that positioning out or something just so that the Void Doom doesn't get absolutely shredded. Put maybe a slightly tankier hero back in that, on that backline there. If it's sorcerers, I would actually spread further. I would... So that's the primary positioning. Let's go back to that. That's the primary positioning against, like, that's a mid-game positioning. You're getting your Sanzang firing off as quickly as possible. You got your assassins back left and the rest of your heroes back right to encourage your enemies to move forward, for your assassins to get to that back line. If it was... maybe I'm up against a sorcerer build at the end of the game, then what I might end up doing is spreading something like this, where I'll have a variation of, so got these ranged heroes back here, I've got my assassins backline, I've got the heroes that I want getting their abilities off as quickly as possible in the mid section there, and that way I'm less prone to area of effect stuff hitting all of my heroes at once. So that's another consideration, but once again, you're generally transitioning from a mid-game positioning to a late-game positioning once you know the opponent or final opponents you're going to be matched up against. And that is why, other than knowing what build to go for, it's always important to be checking the screen that gives you the overview, so you can track what build you want to go for and also how you should be positioning at various positions in the game. I don't think that there's any other key positioning that I will use outside of what I've already shown you. Sometimes you can reverse this. If you are really worried about assassins, you can actually put the tanky heroes in that back line, squishy heroes in the front line, and kind of reverse the positioning of stuff there. But once again, that's not an often used positioning. I don't generally use that, but it's an option. It's another option. You can really do anything with your positioning, and there is no right or wrong answer, because there's so many things that it depends on. It depends on your exact build. It depends on your enemy's build, but it's just, I think, once again, I'm going to go over the things that's worth considering when working out your positioning. So obviously your pieces and the enemy pieces, the heroes that you need to get their abilities off as quickly as possible, the heroes you need to be avoiding, and whether you need to deal with assassins and area of effect stuff as well. They're the considerations, melee and range, of course, as well. As long as you're aware of all those things, you should be pretty good with your positioning. A lot of it just comes with experience, working out heroes and builds and things like that. And then, as I touched on earlier, if it's just not working for you, just try flipping the formation as though it was looking at itself in the mirror. Push it all across to the other side and see what that does for you, and maybe that will change the tides of battle in your favor. So yeah, that's basically it. That's everything I can think of at this point in time regarding positioning. If you've got anything that you felt I missed, or maybe something that I'm not aware of, please let me know in the comments down below. What are some of your favorite positioning strategies and tactics? Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you enjoyed this and you want to see more content like this, please make sure to hit that like button and to subscribe to my channel. Until next time, I'll see you later.